Good morning, Bucknutters. Welcome to the Bucknuts Morning 5 here on Friday, December 28th, 2018. I am Dave Biddle, along with Steve Helwagen, here in sunny Los Angeles. We're on West Coast time. We are bringing you the Bucknuts Morning 5 about 3 hours later than usual. Hey, we're 3 hours behind you guys right now as we prepare for the Rose Bowl here, prepare to cover the Rose Bowl. Steve, Ohio State has a practice here in about an hour and a half that we're going to cover. I guess the biggest news that came out of the practice a couple days ago was that Thayer Munford was not practicing. That doesn't mean he's not going to play in the game, but it does mean he's questionable at least. Just your thoughts on what you're hearing on Thayer Munford.
Yeah, I think that would be a tremendous blow, obviously, to Ohio State to not have their left tackle. Josh Olive has filled in at various points in the year when Munford has had to go down for a prolonged period of time, and that would definitely hurt Ohio State because they've done a great job of keeping Dwayne Haskins clean in the pocket. The sacks have basically become non-existent down the stretch. Early in the season, there were issues with pass protection, but as the season wore on, they just did an outstanding job. That position group in and of itself, Dave, to me, made as many strides as any on this team. I think the linebacker group by the end of the year was serviceable, whereas at the beginning of the year they were, useless. So I would say those two areas probably came on as much as anything on the team. And if Thayer Munford can't go, at least you have a guy in Olive who has been in there in some tight situations and handled his business. So I guess we'll see what happens. Perhaps he only plays part of the game. Hard to say, but the big picture is that he comes back next year and has kind of an all-Big Ten, quasi-All-American season, I think, at left tackle for Ohio State. They didn't get a lot of the credit this year for the huge numbers that they put up, but I think next year everybody's going to know their name. Obviously remains to be seen what Haskins is going to do, but I think certainly he's positioned to have a great college career.
That's a great point, Steve. And, a lot of people just assume that Greg Studrawa was going to lose his job, or at least that his job was in trouble. Do you feel like that he has saved his job? He obviously was a good friend of Urban, still is a good friend of Urban. Now with Ryan Day taking over, do you feel like that Studrawa has saved his job?
Yeah, I think Ryan Day is not going to be looking to have wholesale openings on this staff. I think he wants some continuity, and I think it is a possibility that Studrawa would now be retained. I'm not sure how that factors into the recruitment of Doug Nestor, if he is just disillusioned by the fact that Urban Meyer is not going to be there, period, and wants to look around at some other schools, or what the situation is, or if he is basing everything he's doing on Ohio State having Studrawa going forward. So to me, I think that's kind of an interesting situation that we'll be watching going forward, who is going to be retained and who is not. And I think Studrawa, with the way the offensive line played down the stretch, certainly deserves a look to come back, I think, for next year, maintain that continuity. And you have to decide if Michael Jordan comes back, is the best lineup for this team at center for him, or should he move back to guard and allow some of the other guys to play? Wyatt Davis obviously will start this game in place of Demetrius Knox, who's out for the year. So kind of a transition period for the offensive line, but at the same time, you can see that the future stars already lining up to replace the guys who are leaving.
Yeah, and Mike Jordan's an interesting one. That's one that I think he's going to come back for his senior year next year, but he could leave. I mean, he was named first-team All-American by one outlet. I know our friends at Pro Football Focus didn't think he played like at an All-American level this year. He played well, but not crazy good like maybe some of the All-American lists would have you believe. And he wasn't a unanimous All-American or even like a consensus All-American. It was just one outlet. I can't remember what it was. One of the magazines named him first-team All-American. But if you had to guess right now, Steve, do you think Mike Jordan's going to come back for his senior year?
Well, I hate to waffle and say it's 50-50, but I would probably lean toward him coming back. I've heard no indications that he wants to leave. I think previously that may have been the case, but you see him at an event like yesterday, the Lowry's Beef Bowl. He's got the biggest smile on his face and is enjoying every minute of this. So I think he's kind of, in a lot of ways, changed his life, it seems to me, from where, maybe there were some sketchy things going on at one point, and you think about background and everything else, and yet I think now he is positioned, as you said, to come back next year and be in position for All-American honors, and possibly make himself a first-round NFL draft pick. It's that consistency that really sets the best of the best apart, and I think that is what maybe he'll be searching for if he comes back next year.
And it's kind of weird to talk about this with us getting ready to go out to practice and watch this team prepare for the Rose Bowl. But Justin Fields I know every Buckeye fan listening to this show wants to hear about Justin Fields. And, I don't think we have anything really new to bring you, but because nothing's going to happen until after the bowl game one way or the other. If he stays at Georgia, if he transfers somewhere other than Ohio State, or if he transfers to Ohio State, it's not going to happen until after the bowl season. But it's going to happen really quick after the bowl season. And right now, Steve, if I had to guess from everything that I've read, everything I've heard, just piecing everything together, using common sense with some of the things that have happened, I think Justin Fields is going to transfer to Ohio State. I think he will be a Buckeye. Now, will he be eligible right away? We'll find out. But I do think he's going to try and be eligible right away, and I think Justin Fields is going to try and be a Buckeye.
Yeah, I think that seems to be where things are headed, and obviously he wants to do the right thing by Georgia and get through this game. And, it is kind of a questionable situation. You think about he picked them knowing that Fromm was there. I mean, that's the first thing. And so he sat behind him this year and learned and got some drips and drabs here and there. I think the infamous fake punt against Alabama, they put him in there for that. And I don't know. I think I want to see more. Our Georgia folks from 24/7 Sports will be all over this story after the Sugar Bowl to see if he has anything to announce at that point. Things have to happen pretty quickly, though. If he's coming to Ohio State immediately to go through spring ball, the winter semester starts January the 7th. I know this because I have two students of my own who are sophomores at OSU. The winter break this year is kind of truncated. It started mid-month in years past, but this year, because however the calendar lays, Ohio State starts the term January 7th. So even the guys who are going to the All-American Bowls that week into the 5th and 6th have a quick turnaround if they're enrolling at Ohio State. So, it'll be interesting to see what Fields does. It seems like he's coming to Ohio State. The bigger question for me is, how does he get eligible? I think that is a sketchy situation, to say the least, that they have any kind of grounds for a hardship waiver. A guy from Georgia going to Ohio State, leaving Georgia, and trying to be eligible next year on whatever grounds that they may have. I don't see it. So perhaps they'll bend some type of NCAA legislation in their favor, but I find that to be just kind of sketchy at best that's going to happen. But stranger things have happened. We remember last year with Shea Patterson, it seemed open and shut, and it took them until roughly late April or May, sometime there, to get an indication from the NCAA that he would be eligible to play. And that involved improprieties at Ole Miss, where you figured everybody that left there would be immediately eligible because of the probation. So that situation doesn't exist here either. So I don't know. I guess we'll see what kind of fancy footwork the Fields family, fancy footwork for Fields family. That's pretty good. That's as good as it gets. We'll see what kind of fancy footwork they come up with.
All right, last thing, we brought up Stud earlier. Let's talk about Greg Schiano. He met with the media yesterday, and it depends on how you interpret the interview. We had some people thinking, Schiano knows that he's moving on, he's laying the groundwork. Some people interpreted that interview, Steve, as Schiano thinks he's staying on. We have a thread on the Front Row message board right now with a Front Row message board subscriber saying that they believe Schiano's sticking around. I don't know. If I had to guess, I think that there's going to be a shakeup on the staff and the defensive staff, and more than Billy Davis is going to go. I think Billy Davis is going to go and probably Schiano as well, but who knows? I mean, I don't know that for a fact. What do you think is going to happen with Schiano?
I think it's interesting. Obviously, he was Urban Meyer's friend. Does that translate to him being Ryan Day's friend? I know Ryan Day, when he was the head coach early in the season, really credited Greg Schiano for helping that transition. And in some ways, you could have regarded them as the co-head coaches. One of the funny moments, I think, was the Oregon State game when they gave up the second long run. You could see Ryan Day kind of angle down to that end of the field and ask Greg Schiano, exactly what am I going to have to tell these people after the game about what exactly we were trying to do on defense on those two plays? And then obviously it didn't stop there. They gave up the long run against TCU. They gave up just 5 plays of 50 yards or longer by Maryland against Ohio State. People wonder, how did that game get to overtime? It's because Ohio State's defense was pathetically awful. This is a historic season in terms of points and yards allowed. They're going to set records for both by the time the Rose Bowl. They've already given up more points than any Ohio State team in history, and they're something like 80 yards away from giving up the most yards. And so, if he decides he wants to clean house and start over, he'd be well within his rights. I think the other things to think about was this was a defense in transition with so many new starters. And the last thing is our Oklahoma site is reporting that Ryan Grinch may or may not have been contacted by Lincoln Riley or Oklahoma to take over the defensive coordinator position there. They're looking at the co-defensive coordinator from Alabama, who's in this mix as well, and then Ryan Grinch. So I think Ryan Day is going to have to make some very quick decisions if he doesn't already have it mapped out in his mind where this thing's headed, because if they want to hang on to Grinch, they may have to make him the primary defensive coordinator and bid adieu to Greg Schiano. And he served Ohio State well to get through kind of a bridge, but they got to play better defense than that if they expect to win it all next year.
Well, thanks very much to Steve Helwagen for his wisdom on this edition of the Bucknuts Morning 5 here from Los Angeles. Again, we're going to be covering Ohio State's practice here in about an hour and a half or so, or at least we'll be leaving in an hour and a half or so. So we'll keep it locked to Bucknuts for all the coverage from practice today, interviews. Obviously, we have media day on Sunday. We have offensive interviews tomorrow. So plenty of stuff to get you ready for the Rose Bowl. So keep it locked to Bucknuts. Again, thanks to Steve Helwagen, and thanks to all the listeners out there for tuning into the show. I appreciate it. Hope you have a great day and a great weekend. Let's hear that Buckeye swag, best damn band in the land.